Jane Austen was a young author who lived during the 1700s to the 1800s. Despite being a woman, she was a successful author who believed in love. She loved writing, and her work is still praised by millions of readers around the world. Jane Austen was born on December 16, 1775, in England, around the time of the American Revolution. She had 6 siblings, and she loved life with her family. She read many of her father's books, who was a minister, teacher, and farmer. Jane's only sister, Cassandra, was her dear friend. Even though girls didn't typically attend school, her parents sent Jane and Cassandra to Oxford boarding school. Jane didn't like it there very much. The school was harsh and strict. So after she and her sister recovered from an illness, they returned home where they were homeschooled. They tried attending the Abbey school, but it was too expensive, so the girls came home again. Jane's cousin Eliza visited often, and she encouraged her to write and learn French. At this time, she and her sister could start finding husbands. They went to balls and parties. They were well-mannered and polite. The fun experiences gave Jane new ideas to write about. Later on, Jane fell in love with Thomas Lefroy, a young man who recently moved to their area. But his family wanted him to marry a rich woman, so he moved away, leaving Jane heartbroken. She gained even more ideas for stories. After compiling all of her experiences, she eventually finished her manuscript called First Impressions. In this story, the character Elizabeth Bennet was based on Jane's character. They both wanted to marry for love, not money, and they thought that women should have as many rights as men. Eventually, Elizabeth got married to Darcy, whom she thought was arrogant and rude, but they fell in love after digging deeper into their character. They teach each other how to love and be reasonable. Life went on as Jane tried to find a husband. Her siblings and families had many children. She met Harris Bigg, a rich man, at a party. Soon, he proposed to her. She replied yes because he was wealthy and owned a lot of land. But afterwards, she changed her mind because she realized she didn't love him, and she believed that people should marry because of their love, not because of their money. Being a woman, she didn't have much of a choice, but she was confident in her decision. She told Harris that she'd changed her mind and that she wouldn't marry him. Jane continued to write in her own room at her own small table. She had many nieces and nephews, and she played with them a lot, but she still couldn't find a husband. She eventually sent her manuscript called Sense and Sensibility to a publisher. She didn't include her name because it wasn't proper for a woman to earn money by writing. The title page said, "By a Lady." Sense and Sensibility soon became very popular, and Jane earned about $15,000. Because her first book was going so well, she sent her story, First Impressions, to a publisher. But they said that there was already an existing book called First Impressions, so she renamed it to Pride and Prejudice. She still couldn't include her name, so the title page read, "By the author of Sense and Sensibility." Pride and Prejudice was an even bigger hit than Sense and Sensibility. She then got another story called Mansfield Park published, and then she revised the story Emma. It's about how Emma tries to make romance by setting up her friends on dates, which all end up in comical disaster. Jane makes it clear that marrying for money isn't always the right decision, and that people should be happy with the spouse who they love. Jane's brother became ill one day, and his doctor just so happened to be the personal physicist of the Prince of Wales. He told Jane that the prince loved her books, and that she was invited to his library. She visited the library where the librarian suggested that she dedicate her next books to the prince. So she dedicated Emma to the Prince of Wales. Emma soon became one of her most popular books, but she still couldn't add her name in her own books. Her family bought back Jane's manuscript of Susan from a publisher who never published it, and Jane was able to revise the story and retitle it Northanger Abbey. But as she was revising it, Jane began to feel ill. Her family brought her comfort, and she began to feel better. But just as she finished her manuscript of Persuasion, her next book, she began to feel ill again. Her illness grew worse, and the doctors couldn't do anything about it. Jane died on July 18, 1817. She was buried in Winchester Cathedral, a now historic church. Her family made sure that Northanger Abbey and Persuasion were published, and this time Jane's name appeared on the title page. Later on, in 2013, the Bank of England announced that Jane Austen will be the first woman whose portrait will appear on British money. On the £10 knit banknote it reads, "I declare after all there is no enjoyment like reading." Jane Austen was a confident young woman dedicated to writing. She lived during the time when women were minorities, but she still proved that women had minds of their own. She is still famous today because of her ordinary characters who had deep feelings and gave the readers a sense of connection. Her stories showed how marriage was important and it should be taken seriously. She wanted to let people know how to be reasonable and less arrogant and selfish, that you shouldn't judge someone based on their money, but what kind of character they had. Her novels were different from others because her characters were not only smart and funny, but they were normal people with very entertaining stories that told important themes. She let her readers know that everyone has their own stories, whether it's fun or not, they're all interesting. In Pride and Prejudice, Jane writes about how Charlotte marries Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins was extremely rich, but he was very rude and narrow-minded. Charlotte does not end up loving Mr. Collins, and they don't lead a very happy life together. However, in her novel Sense and Sensibility, Eleanor and Edward seem to fall in love, but they cannot have a happy marriage because they don't earn enough money. They didn't need great wealth and luxury, but they needed enough money to have a family and live a content life. Hey everyone, how's it going? If you enjoyed the video, please leave a big thumbs up. If you like the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Fun fact, I was named after Jane Austen's book Emma. Thanks for watching.